Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining me in this discussion, focusing on the seventh chapter of the book, Jesus in Our Days. So as we can look here in the table of content, we keep on working, right? We're on the seventh chapter, as I mentioned before. And just as a reminder, the psychological series by the spiritual author Joanna de Angelis is powerful. It is impactful. In today's case, it is quite interesting because there's so much packed into those 3 pages. Yes, as we are here to present the ideas and in the insightful messages, we understand that each chapter is only 3 pages long, and of course they contain different perspective about Jesus. But as we dive into his teaching, let's see how they can touch you and I love to say this because the overarching method here is that Joanna de Angelis, in her collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco, they bring these idea, this notion, this image of a Jesus who's no longer in the cross. So it's an uncrucified Jesus. And so I welcome you to bring him, this new Jesus, into your life as I am doing to my life, so that he, little by little, as we understand him, can help us address those challenging situations whenever we confront them. His therapeutical teachings will lead us to a sense of health, peace, and happiness. As we see here next week, chapter 8, we'll look into Jesus and duty, and we are getting close to halfway through the book. But let's go on to start our first discussion, which is the idea of the aim of justice. What is the goal of the justice? And Joanna starts the chapter saying that the goal is to repair any damaged. Repair what damage, and damage caused by whom? Well, caused by anyone who's doing something wrong. If you were following, and I'm putting my um, corporate head, right? If you're following process, if you follow procedures and policy, you should be able to get the outcome that you get. And if you do wrong, you may cause issues, processes, risks. Well, in the justice, divine justice, this overarching justice which rules our lives, anybody who breaks a law, a policy, process is doing something wrong. Therefore, they're called the wrongdoers. So the goal of justice is to not punish, but to rehabilitate them back to the sense of equilibrium in society. So it's just very interesting because in my personal life, right? I had surgery and had issues where I needed to go through rehabilitation of the muscles in my knee in this case. And it's really a question of working on re-educating myself to use my body, but also to rehab, right? To go through those physical therapy to get back to where I was before. So back to the idea of justice. Justice will work then on the re-education using different measures, right? So in the case of in human sense of justice, we're talking about those who break the law, human law, are considered criminals after a trial. And as a direct result of that, yes, they are now limited, just like I was for a long time, limiting my own movements. They're now limited. Their freedom has been limited in order to ensure that the larger community will not suffer from those laws being broken, those processes not being followed. So, whenever, simply saying, whenever a crime happens, it just means that whatever the established codes of law that govern a people, and yes, human laws are relative, they're not infinitely written, they go through iterations as peoples evolve. So a crime is a result of a disregard of those established codes of law that will govern a certain group of people. And they provide individuals with equal rights and responsibilities. So, caveat here is whenever that temporal, right, based on a given circumstance, a certain, um, shall I say, context or ecosystem, when that sense of justice is corrupt, the end result is those immersed in that context will often act in random ways, right? And the abuse of authority will lead to a state of recklessness, right? And it can be seen in excessive behaviors. You can see in issues that will keep breaking that organizational structure so that it was there working. So I would like at this moment to tell you, as we study or we read and interpret a chapter, 3 pages about Jesus, historical figure, right, and a religious figure, Jesus and justice, I'd say I would like to live in a just society. And by just society, I mean that society that all immersed in that society enjoy equal opportunities. And those equal opportunities for progress, they are born out of equal, and this is really important because we're going to be talking for the next, say, 20 plus minutes on the idea of equity, equality. So, this equal distribution of wealth, of strength. So, with that, that means that if you see in a just society where some are stronger than others, they become responsible for those weaker ones, just like a parent will do that to their young child. They'll protect the weak. The healthy will assist those who are sick. The young will help with the elderly, and those behaviors, right, are simply put resulting from this embedded sense of uh, responsibility. And I don't have to have anything written down. You are healthy, going to take care of those who are not healthy. It is from within me the sense of responsibility, and because of that, overall, this so-called ecosystem will establish a sense of happiness for all because there is solidarity amongst all individuals. That remounts to the French Revolution, right? The idea in the 1700s, mid 1700s, of the desire for solidarity, fraternity. And that would be the just society. But we're not there yet. It's important to understand that as we develop in our immortal, right? That long journey of life after life, what we need to develop is our feelings, our sentiments, as well as our intelligence. And when we do that individually and collectively, our laws, societal laws of our community will indeed become gentler, and justice will reach a more equitable status. Not now, in the near future, and we are the champions of that. So let's just for a moment pause to think about our earlier journey as in our humanity, right? Our journey on Earth, and we're talking about I don't know, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. As we look into the more primitive cultures, that notion of the law of the strongest, which is based on survival, is the prevalent one. It is one that, again, if you now go back, no longer 5,000, but maybe you 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 200 years ago, and yes, it's all in our tabloids today. We see the still somewhat absurd condition of power, no longer from I'm the strongest, therefore I own this because I usurped through imperialistic measures, through killings, through whatever it is that our history brings to us, but now because of my bloodline, because of who I am, I was born in the sequence of my birth, heredity. And as we come closer to where we are today, we all hope, now we're talking about this social democratic principles are now brought to all of us. So the end result is that personal responsibility will take priority versus the freedom of an individual. So, as I say this, the road is very long and we are getting there, even though we're not there. But it's a road that will lead us to respect one another, to respect life, to respect nature, and reach a sense of justice that is no longer arbitrary. And by arbitrary, if you look into the definition of what is to be arbitrary from a legal perspective, it is a reference to, let's say, a rules in the judge's rules in a court case where it is completely personal biased opinion and it's based on an individual discretion rather than the application of the code of that law. Does this make sense to you? So now we're going to talk to the hardest part, which is the notion of equitable, sorry for that, equitable justice. And I say that because it's important for us to think in terms of justice, legal system, right? The system of laws, and how do you apply that in an arbitrary or not law? And then there is the sense of equitable justice because Jesus, and we're studying Jesus in justice, is exactly that. He is the champion of equitable justice. And I'd just like to, if I may, because this is quite complex as we become more and more polarized society where we become a divided in what we think is right or wrong. So I'm giving myself permission to talk about those concepts further. So I'm saying, and this is based on Joanna de Angelis, that Jesus was a champion of equitable justice. Let's define what equitable means. And there's two words that they get confusing: equity and equality. Yes, yes. So equity is defined as the quality or ideal of being just, impartial, and fair. And so, from that perspective, if I say equity is equitable justice, we're saying equity is a fair, just justice. I went to United Way, and in United Ways, they have an entire initiative called United Way of the National Capital Area. They are really they're really bringing the notion and championing the cause for equity and equality. So let's just stop for a minute to define what is equity. Is the quality, as I said before, of being fair and impartial. Equality is the state of being equal. And this is really important in relation to status, rights, and opportunities. And why does this matter? Well, it matters when we start to talk about oppressed or marginalized people. So when we talk about equity, and we talk about specifically related to social and racial justice, it just means that equity, that those communities, they will be receiving resources and opportunity as needed to create an equal outcome for all community members, right? And when we talk about equality, it just means that each individual or group of people is given the same resources and opportunities. So, do you see the difference? Equity, it's all about the outcome, equal outcome. Equality means we're given the equal resources and opportunities regardless where you are. And so when we talk about this, this is important because of the social and racial justice movements that we're finding every day to us, where they're bringing the notion that equality, given the equal resources, may lead to an increased inequity in communities because not every group of people needs the same resources or opportunities allocated to them in order to thrive. So, very interesting. Us humans, we are expected to thrive, and maybe if we were to distribute equally the opportunities and resources, it will still lead to inequalities, right? So it's very interesting to say that, and there is a illustration that is very famous now, and the United Ways is bringing forth for that. Is if you put three different people in height, I think you've seen. And they're young boys, but they're one is much taller, one is mid-size, and the other one is quite short. And there is a fence, and the three of them would like to see perhaps, I don't know, a baseball game on the other side. If you give them three equal size stools for them to see to go over the fence, the tallest and perhaps the mid-size they can see. But the young one, the shorter one, even with that stool, cannot see. It's just not tall enough. So the idea here is there is no one size fits all solution to the problems that we see in the world. This is a material view of the world, which would be that. So practicing equity helps address imbalanced social systems, right? Nevertheless, justice can take one step further by changing societal systems in order to achieve what would be a sustainable and equitable access for our future generations in the long term. But what does Spiritism say about justice, about equity and equality? This is very interesting. Well, let's go back to Jesus, which is the source of our material discussion today, and we are giving the accounts that Jesus' attitudes toward everyone was always the same. Okay, he was good, he was benevolent, and no matter where your station in life, he used the same kindness with the goal of educating, which is the reason why we have this justice systems. Remember, it was the first thing that Joanna talks about in this book, and it just means that he used kindness and he had a well-meaning goal, regardless of who you are. So from that perspective, and I hope you are acquainted to the New Testament, but Jesus, he met with Nicodemus, who was a doctor in the upper house of the Sanhedrin. And he did the same with Zacchaeus, a tax collector. He talked to Lazarus, considered dead man, as he talked to his sisters. So he also was benevolent to the thief who was by his side at the cross. And I just wanted to take this moment to pause and perhaps reach within us to find confirmation. Do we even do this? Do we even avail ourselves to anyone who comes to us, to those closest to us, as well as to the complete stranger, no matter what? So when we realize that people differ, right, and they differ due to their intellectual, moral achievements, they differ because of their psychological maturity levels, right? Their moral and spiritual hierarchical development, and we understand that they differ, and the outcome of those differences, what they bring with them, their baggage that they bring, is really result from a merit perspective of their personal acquisitions. Right. And if they do this, we have to understand those differences should be there. But like Jesus, we should understand that we welcome them all of us, all of those around us, even those away from us that don't think or behave or look like us. We should give them the same kindness and the same benevolence to them all, understanding that the same conditions, opportunities, and impartial, unbiased, impartial judgment of them should be there because we all started equal, right? Simple and unaware spirits. And Jesus did that by treating with love the adulteress, the prostitute, the priest, right? And he also treated the same the Sadducees or the Pharisees. So I stop here because it's very interesting for us to confirm, understand. who were the Sadducees? Well, the Sadducees were a regional, a religious political group that had great deal of power amongst those Jews in Israel. Not all priests were Sadducees, but many of the priests were, and they preserved with just a very strong attitude to preserve the written law of God, the written word of God, especially from the book of Moses. So, important to, it's just a side note, they ceased to exist around the year AD 70 when Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed by the Romans. Now, the Pharisees were not as powerful, but they were powerful because of their influential religious views within the people of Israel. And at the time of Christ, they were known for their emphasis on piety, right? And the acceptance of the oral, not written word, oral tradition, in addition to the written law. And they did everything, but it's important for us to know they did everything from a surface appearance level. So because of the laws, they understood the law as what we need to show. They did a lot of work for that purification ceremonies, but they were not really looking at themselves. So Jesus was called who they were. We're often seeing the text. They're called hypocritical, right? Hypocritical because they were not behaving as they should behave based on their words. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to Matthew chapter 23. He specifically says, words of Jesus, right? The Pharisees, do not practice what they preach. And yet they were this self-righteous, smug, even delusional, because they felt they were pleasing God because they kept the law, even though it was in appearance only. But back to Jesus, right? We're here to talk about Jesus. When Jesus scolded those who tried to catch him, and the both Sadducees and the Pharisees tried to do that, and they used arguments that were created specifically, deliberately to deceive Jesus. So he scolded them. And the really important thing here is that he was very assertive, and he he was strong in his discussion and benevolent at the same time, but he never neglected or let go of compassion. He knew, knowing the potentiality of each one's being, each one's journey, he had compassion because he knew at the same time who you were as you were presented to him, and how, quote unquote, sick you are from what you bring with you. So it's very important because, again, and this is Joanna de Angelis talking about at the time of Jesus, there was a lot of, again, the same word arbitrary judgment, right? In that age, which quite frankly, we still see this today, hence those social and racial movements toward equity that we talked earlier, right? But Jesus was magnanimous. He looked at maybe the abuse of power from those two sects, but he spoke about what? An invitation for all of us to renounce, to give away our arrogance, our pride. He invited us to become humble. And whenever he saw exploitation, he no longer taught, but he lived benevolence. And he proposed to all of us that our sense of justice should not be the justice of the Pharisees, right? What he meant by that, simply saying, was do not uh, use words righteousness, right, the words of morally strong, and at the same time taking advantage of those who are weak, who are sick, who are in need, right? And it's very interesting if you think about it. I want to close our discussion today with the notion of that being equitable toward all, and it's important for us to think about. If you, if I am entangled in the baggage that I bring from former experience existences, our mistakes, our errors, and we are really caught in this web of a system of justice that is imperfect. Let's take the opportunity to remember, whatever that is, it is to for us to re-educate who you are, right? Who we are as individuals. And this is very important because the divine justice is just, but it goes into much stronger narrative, not of the transactional wrongdoing, if you will, or not following a policy, process, or law, right? Not transactional in that point, but it is all about what is it that we're going through and how can I realign myself, reconnect myself to a system that is balanced in equilibrium and in our real goal to be in this life. So, from that perspective, we should trust in God. And in this point, Joanna de Angelis tells us, if you've been harmed, and I'm sure all of us have been harmed in some way or wrongly accused, she just says, do not despair. Go forward. Pay, if you're in pay in quotation marks, right? Pay whatever you perhaps have forgotten to pay in the past to another person, to another circumstances. Just be aware that divine justice will reach you regardless of where you are. So it's better for us to re-educate, to repair whatever commitments, even when we don't feel or remember to be responsible, right? So that we have the clear conscience, because true justice, the divine justice, always catches up for those who are not aligned and break the law. So, for your part, be just, be equitable toward all, and use Jesus's behavior to whomever fails you. And I have just, I would like to take just a moment to talk before I close today, and it's add on, but the book in the psychological series, The Conscious Being, it tells us something that is so important to me, in that paradox. Um, the systems of justice is flawed, that we cannot be truly equitably just because the outcomes will not be equal, uh, as the opportunities being equal does not really address inequities that we bring forth, right? But um, Joanna de Angelis, in that book, and I'm going to mostly read for you, if you don't mind. It's just will take us about 3, 4, 5 minutes. But she says that if you look at and she's referring this when she's talking about this transcendental psychology that is brought forth, for example, by Jungian theories, and she talks about the old paradigms and models about us human beings. And she said, this is no longer updated. They have given away when we were introduced to those theories where the introduction of the concept of ancestral beings. So you see what I mean when we talk about equity and equality from a material lens. This is urgent, but she says, beware that we have been introduced by that psychoanalysis and transcendental theories that we are ancestral beings, and we bring with us a historiography of many incarnations, reincarnations that lead us to where we are today, which is the development of my own self, my deep self. And she references there is a schism or departure between the axis between self, our spirit, and the ego, our personality, that is required. This is structure that is required for us to be able to live in this material life. So when she said, is it, she talked about at the point when those differences between self and ego disappear, is that when the analysis of our spiritual body shows that each personality that we bring today is indeed the result of the experience that we bring forth from each incarnation. And she also talks about personality, now individuality, as the sum of all the accomplishments, the goals, the achievements during each incarnation. So when she talks about that, she references again the current psychosocial environment that we have in, and she says, thanks to this phenomena, right? That is the idea of bringing with us those ancestral knowledge of us as ancestral beings. The psychosocial pressures in the environment, education, struggles, and activities, they arise contributing, and I'm reading here, contributing one way or another to the accomplishments or goals to make, so that we are able to make amends according to my own personal merit or debit. Does this make sense to you? So she acknowledges the idea of an equitable justice, but does not deny the fact that as ancestral beings, we bring a lot with us that will result in those differences and will result in psychosocial pressures. And she goes on to say, we are all born or reborn into the families and the social groups that we need to evolve. This is important to understand. We are exactly where we need to be. And it's not a question of, I'm here because I deserve better. I'm here because I need to. And she even goes on to talk about there's additional inputs to this, right? My gender, my social economic conditions, all of those things, environmental conditions that you inserted on are the framework for what I need from a moral, spiritual growth or refinement process that is in coming from each reincarnation. And it's awesome because she talks about this cauldron, this soup, if you will, where we're all put in order to evolve. So she closes that with a call to say, this is why there are many differences in each one of us, physiological, psychological differences, right? Even in identical twins. And it's all about what each spirit currently incarnated in a body, even as identical twins, will bring different acquisitions from them. So she closes with psychological maturity is a bumpy road. It is a road that is made with, yes, successes and yes, failures and yes, repeat, right? Repeat until we get that. And that leads to a very complex picture of humanity and humanity's individuality. As I close today, I just wanted to read two paragraphs from that book verbatim because I think it's just so beautiful. She closes, and I would like to close with you by saying, love is the flame that burns brightly, providing light, providing warmth, as it nourishes with peace, resulting from the exchange of energies between the one who loves and the object of that love. Thus, right, we're not talking about love to your partner, that the erotic concept of love, but the love for one another, the love that Jesus brought to us. And she closes finally by saying, thus empathy develops and frees individuals from their primitivism, leading them to the immense arena of progress where the experience of giving becomes enriching. They strive to forget themselves as they constantly bear their neighbor in mind. So, with that, I'd say in this complex discussion about justice from the lens of Jesus, let us all behave like him. Let us all be kind, be generous, be gentle, and really be equanimous. And what I mean by that is we don't need to judge the other. We don't need to even judge the pressure cooker that the person is involved, be it in the context of violence, of poverty, utter poverty, or disenfranchised existence. Let us be the champion to bring love and to bring compassion and to bring empathy to the suffering of the others so that we can contribute to um, that society that is just as we need it to be. But anyways, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being with me. I hope that this made sense to you. I found this chapter quite inquisitive one, and hope to see you next week when we talk about duty. Thank you. Bye bye.